This is the Build Wealth Canada podcast, episode number 54.
Welcome to the Build Wealth Canada podcast, where it's all about becoming debt-free, accelerating your wealth, and taking control of your money. Now, here's your host, Cornell Schreiber.
Hey, it's Cornell and welcome to the Build Wealth Canada show. Today, I have the actual creator of the TFSA on the show, so the tax-free savings account. So I'm super excited to share this interview with you, as who better to get the best TFSA tips and strategies from than the actual creator of the TFSA. Now, his name is Kevin McCarthy, and while working in Ottawa, Kevin was responsible for the financial literacy file for Minister Flaherty and helped launch the federal government's financial literacy panel. And he played a key role in the development and naming of the tax-free savings account, the single most important personal savings vehicle since the introduction of the RRSP, so the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. Now, Kevin has since joined a great organization called Enriched Academy, which focuses on teaching financial literacy here in Canada. And we'll talk about them in a minute. But before joining the private sector, Kevin worked for more than 10 years in government, serving as the advisor to the Ontario Premier and to both a provincial and federal finance minister. And for 8 of those years, he served as a director of policy and chief of staff to Canada's finance minister. Now, Kevin played a central role in all significant financial challenges the government of Canada managed from 2006 to 2013, including the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, and the design and implementation of 8 federal budgets. He also served as the senior advisor to Canada's Prime Minister and Finance Minister in countless international forums, including the G20 and the G7. Now, Kevin has a BA from Queen's University and received the Queen Elizabeth II Golden Jubilee Medal for his work in public policy related to the creation of the tax-free savings account, so the TFSA. So yeah, definitely quite the resume. I'm really excited to have him on to help enhance our financial literacy and give us some top strategies and tactics on getting the most out of our TFSA. Now, Kevin has since joined an organization called Enriched Academy, which I'm a huge fan of, as they essentially have a financial literacy course that I think should be mandatory to every single Canadian. Now, I've gone through it, and it's basically everything about money that I should have been taught in school before entering the real working world. What's also neat is that they were actually successful on Dragon's Den and now have Jim Treleving and Bruce Croxton also endorsing them and their financial literacy program. Now, I know they are working on trying to get it implemented in our schools too, which is amazing because I remember spending countless hours being forced to learn calculus, which I have yet to use, by the way. And yet myself and you have never actually been trained in our school system on things like how to manage your credit score to get the lowest possible rate on your mortgage, and how to decide whether you should be using your RRSP versus your TFSA, and the different investing options available to us as Canadians, and much, much more. So I definitely want to give a big shout out to their course, which you can check out by going to buildwealthcanada.ca/academy. That's buildwealthcanada.ca/academy, ACADEMY. Think of it as a financial literacy checkup to make sure that you're not missing out on some key pieces of knowledge that's secretly holding you back financially and can actually drastically, positively impact the financial life of you and your family. Now, if you know that you're already pretty advanced when it comes to financial literacy and investing, then I instead encourage you to share that link with any friends and family that you think may need help, or that you think may be going through some challenges getting their financial life in order and optimized. And this way, instead of you constantly trying to get them back on track and trying to, sprinkle in some tips here and there to help them out, you can just point them to the course and you'll know that they'll receive a strong foundation and get properly set up for success as far as their finances go. So that link again to check out Kevin and his team's financial literacy course is buildwealthcanada.ca/academy. And last but definitely not least, don't forget to claim your free 1-year digital subscription to Canadian MoneySaver Magazine, Canada's largest personal finance and investing magazine. It's a $20 subscription that you get for free as a Build Wealth Canada listener. And the magazine features Canada's top experts on personal finance and investing, and is a great place to learn best practices and stay up to date on changes that will impact your investments and financial situation for years to come, specifically here in Canada. Now, to get that, all you have to do is open up a free savings account with my favorite bank and the bank that I personally use, EQ Bank. Now, the reason that I personally use EQ Bank is that they have one of the highest interest rates in Canada. In fact, in all the years that I've been with them, I haven't been able to find a higher interest rate anywhere. Plus, it's free to sign up and keep an account with them, so you're not paying a monthly fee like you do with many of the other banks out there. And now you also get unlimited free Interac e-transfers as a bonus, which I think is awesome. So because of those reasons, I've been with them ever since they launched in Canada years ago, and it's where I keep my entire emergency fund and spending money as well. And just to put things in perspective, at the time of this recording, their Savings Plus account automatically gives you 2.3% interest, while other online banks in Canada are offering a maximum of 1.25. And if you're still banking with one of the larger banks, then you're getting less than 1%. So in other words, by using the bank that I use, you're going to almost double the interest that you're getting from your checking and savings accounts, and it's all for free. And this is why I've been using and recommending them for years to anybody that's asked, and even before they became a sponsor on the show. Now, even if you love your current bank just for regular day-to-day use, why wouldn't you at least keep your emergency fund and any extra cash that you're not investing in your savings account over at EQ? That way you're at least earning over double the interest on your checking and savings accounts compared to your current bank. And that's actually what I did when I first started with them years ago. And since then, I've actually transitioned to them now being our primary bank. So to get the free account and 1 year free subscription to Canadian MoneySaver Magazine, just go to buildwealthcanada.ca/EQ. That's buildwealthcanada.ca/the letter E and the letter Q. Open the free account, and once you're done, forward any email that you get from EQ to bonus@buildwealthcanada.ca, and I'll send you a coupon that gets you a free 1 year subscription to the magazine. Normally it's $20 a year. You basically get that for free by opening an account. So that link again is buildwealthcanada.ca/EQ to open an account. Then forward me any email from EQ to bonus@buildwealthcanada.ca, and I'll email you the free coupon code to the magazine. Now, you do have to use that specific link. So you do have to go to buildwealthcanada.ca/EQ and sign up after clicking on that link in order to get the bonus. So just keep that in mind. And that's it. Thank you so much for supporting the show in that way. And now let's get into the episode. All right, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cornell. Thanks for having me.
So, Kevin, to start things off, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background in government, as well as your transition to promoting financial literacy by working with Enriched Academy?
Do that. So my background, as you mentioned, is primarily working in government. I worked for the Ontario government for the Ontario Premier, then Jim Flaherty when he was the Ontario provincial finance minister. And then I spent 8 years from 2006 to 2013 in Ottawa working for, again, Minister Flaherty when he was the finance minister as a policy advisor, director of policy, and then eventually his chief of staff. That was a great experience. I worked on a number of files. I loved it. My kids would say the most important thing I did was getting rid of the penny. I'm not sure if that was the most important thing, but I was involved in getting rid of the penny, which is kind of noteworthy. But I'd probably say, working on the tax-free savings account was really important, and something that I'm pretty proud of. I then went to work with Scotiabank back in Toronto. I worked there for 5 years in a number of roles. And then just joined Enriched Academy about 6 months ago in the last summer. And really did that. I've had a lifelong kind of love of financial education and the need for it, and the feeling that it's not really being taught that well in schools. And I just really felt enriched. I knew the owners. They'd been asking me to join for some time, and I just felt Enriched was kind of the best product out there, and it's a real passion of mine. So I made the jump from government to Scotiabank to Enriched Academy, which is where I am now.
Awesome. And then why did the government decide to introduce the TFSA, and what was your involvement in that?
Yeah, so that, as I mentioned, I was involved in that. That was back in 2008. And so the primary thing Federal Minister of Finance does is the yearly budget for the government. This kind of sets the policy table and sets the direction of the government. And in advance of the 2008 budget, Minister Flaherty was traveling across the country, as he does, as all finance ministers do with budgets, consulting with Canadians, business leaders, academics, not-for-profits, you name it. And so we were out in Vancouver and Calgary as part of our pre-budget consultations. And I remember particularly being with the minister at one of these consultations where the issue of trapped savings that businesses and people had that were in different vehicles. RRSPs were the primary one raised, that people wanted to take that money out, wanted to reinvest it in other ways, but just felt penalized by the potential taxes they were going to pay. So in Vancouver, a strong plea was to create something that would kind of avoid this lock-in effect of money. We then went to Calgary the very next day, or flew that day, had another kind of breakfast roundtable. Someone else raised this very same issue passionately, just saying, look, we've got to do something about this. So Minister Flaherty on the flight home to Ottawa told me, look, we need to do something, try and, talk to our tax officials, like the Department of Finance, working on this. And so they did. There'd been, talks of programs like this before, but this is a real push of his based on kind of what he was hearing from Canadians. The department made a proposal. The structure of the tax-free savings account was kind of developed, with a number of policy discussions, policy decisions about how it would be structured. It was originally named, the draft name for it was actually LISA, a Lifetime Income Savings Account. But the minister did not like that name. Nothing against Lisa. He just didn't feel it was very descriptive of what it was. So he asked myself and a few of our staff, Mary Martin, who was a tax policy advisor involved as well, to try and come up with a different name. We just talked about it, and I thought, like, what is this account really doing? What is this vehicle doing? And it's really, you're having your savings be tax-free. So I proposed the tax-free savings account. The minister liked that idea. He ran it by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister liked that idea. So the tax-free savings account was named, and we announced it in that 2008 budget. And it's really been the biggest, policy development in personal finance since the creation of the RRSP. And I think it's a very popular and important savings vehicles for Canadians.
Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed right now with the way the banks often promote TFSA is they promote it as sort of a traditional savings account, but it's tax-free, right? So functioning similar to what a regular checking or savings account, the way it works at the bank. But so I think a lot of people don't know that you can actually invest in a lot of other things in your TFSA. You don't just have to keep it in a bank sort of TFSA savings account where your returns are going to be relatively low compared to if you were doing something like, index investing and putting the money into indexes. Was that so the banks seem to have noticed have run with that, right? Was that the intention that you guys had when you set this up? Or is it just kind of that they just look at that and say, oh, it has the word savings account in it, so let's push this as a savings account. We'll give people a few percent interest, say it's tax-free, and then we're going to go invest it ourselves and make a lot more money. I mean, it's interesting how things kind of evolved, I've noticed. Can you talk about that a bit? Was that the intention?
For that, I mean, if you look at the budget documents, our promotion of it, it was supposed to be one of the real benefits was the real flexible savings account. So yes, the banks have promoted it that way, and that's, I'd probably say, one of the the challenges or one of the flaws with how people are using these TFSAs. They really are, as you mentioned, you can invest in index funds, you can invest in all sorts of vehicles, and that's why it's such a popular and effective savings account or savings vehicle for tax purposes. So yeah, that was not the intention that it just be a savings account. That was just part of the name, but it has kind of, I would say that's one of the errors that people make, is that they're not realizing the full benefits of being able to invest in stocks, in ETFs, in index funds, any of those sort of things where you can get real gains. And then when you pull it out, you're paying no tax on the capital gains.
For sure. Because I mean, I researched this quite a bit, and I mean, the consensus among sort of investing experts seems to be that you are supposed to put whatever investments you have that you think are going to be the highest growth. As a general rule, that's what you put into your TFSA, because then it can grow tax-free, you can withdraw tax-free. I mean, you did pay tax on it initially when you put the money in, but I mean, that can start compounding for years and you're never taxed on it in the future, like an RRSP. So, so it's interesting how, I don't know. It sounded to me. It seems like the banking industry found a way to kind of make it profitable for them by spinning it on this different sort of angle. And so there's so many people now that are getting their 2% or whatever the case may be. When really they could be, let's say, in equities or even just like a nice balanced portfolio. And be earning double, triple maybe even quadruple that, depending on what they invest in. So, it's very, very interesting. But for anybody that's maybe just getting started learning about RRSPs and TFSAs, can you explain maybe what they are, and then share your best practices on how to use them?
Sure. Yeah. So for most people, the RRSP has been around for a while in the 1950s. So both the RRSPs, Registered Retirement Savings Plan, and the TFSAs are registered savings accounts. The government of Canada has set up, and really for public policy reasons, is to encourage Canadians to save. They are really mirror opposites of each other, the way they've been set up. So with an RRSP, essentially, however much you contribute, you get to lower your taxes for that year. So you save on taxes at the front end. With a tax-free savings account, as you mentioned already, you've already paid taxes on that income. There's no tax benefit at the front end, but any money that's pulled out is tax-free at the back end. So that's where the savings are. There's no capital gains, there's no dividend taxes, no income taxes if you're in GICs or other interest-bearing investments. So those are, they're both, I think, very valuable tools. I think the name, if you're in an RRSP, you're really looking at focus on retirement, because when you do take money out of an RRSP, you're paying taxes on it. So one of the key benefits of that is that you're deferring taxes. So ideally, you're investing in an RRSP when you're at kind of peak earning, you're at your highest marginal tax rate. And then it's in your retirement when you're pulling money out, and you're likely making less money than at your peak time, and so you're paying less tax when you actually pull it out. In terms of best practices, we already touched on one of them. With TFSAs, kind of those investments that you think are going to have the highest growth, those are great vehicles. That's a great use of the TFSA. In broader kind of best practices, at Enriched Academy, we recommend the concept of paying yourself first. I'm sure many of this isn't a new concept, but just really taking 10% of your income automatically out of your pay, putting that into a high interest savings account, and then regularly transferring that into an RRSP, TFSA, or both. So that's a broader best practice that we recommend. I think most investors and professionals recommend.
Yes, sir. And then while we're on the subject of RRSP versus TFSA, with the RRSP, there is the home buyer's plan. And so some people choose to buy their first home using the RRSP, use some of that money as a down payment as part of the home buyer's plan. But the TFSA is more flexible, as there's less rules surrounding it and having to pay the money back and withdrawal rules and things of that nature. What is your preference on if someone is looking to buy their first home and they're debating, okay, well, they're saving for a down payment, we could be putting in an RRSP and then use the home buyer's plan to take it out, or we could just be using the TFSA, which is just a lot more flexible and has a lot less restrictions on it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my thoughts. So I have used, when my wife and I first bought our first home, we used the home buyer's plan out of our RRSP, but at the time there was no such thing as a TFSA. So we did use that program, and it's an effective program to help people invest in their first house. But I would say now, with the creation of the tax-free savings account, I'd recommend that people use that instead. For, as you said, it's the flexibility that's embedded in the program into the vehicle in terms of being able to pull out money, again, tax-free whenever you want. I really think with the addition of the tax-free savings account, people should be using their RRSP solely for retirement purposes. Once you take that money out of either account, but once you take it out of RRSP, you do have to pay it back, but you're losing, that compounding interest power for the amount of time you've taken out of that. So my recommendation would be for the RRSP, use it as it's named for retirement, and you've now got this tax-free savings account. If you're looking to save for a first-time home for that down payment, use that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I remember I had Rob Carrick on the show from the Globe and Mail quite a while ago, and that was one of the things he mentioned as well. So it was interesting to see that your perspective is the same as his. Was that the home buyer's plan was created before the TFSA existed, and so that was sort of the only sort of go-to in terms of tax somewhat sheltered strategies of how you can start saving for a home. But he also said the same thing you did, where just how now with the TFSA it is just so much more flexible, and how that is actually he believed was better suited for saving money for a down payment, just like in your case. So that's very, very interesting how things have sort of evolved into what used to be the kind of the go-to strategy for new home buyers now has migrated to just using the TFSA for that. And for anybody that wants to check out that episode, that was episode number 18. That was buildwealthcanada.ca/18 is the number 18 if you do want to listen to that episode. But yeah, very, very interesting to hear that you guys both actually had the same perspective, even though traditionally that wasn't the recommendation, right? The default for the longest time was just use the home buyer's plan. And that's no longer sort of the one and only perfect solution anymore. So that's really interesting. Now, I find definitely one of, if not the most common questions that Canadian investors have is how to decide for any given year whether they should be putting their savings in their TFSA, RRSP, or maybe a combination of the two. So as someone who helped create the TFSA, what would you say to someone that is asking this question?
Yeah, it's a popular question. It's one that, to be honest, I debate at times as well. I don't think there's one size that fits all. It really depends on individual circumstances. And again, I think both are good vehicles, and both should be used. But I'd suggest just some rules of thumb. If you're in a high tax bracket and are really focused on retirement savings, I think the RRSPs are still the way you should go, and that should be your focus. If you're just starting out, potentially in a lower tax bracket, or you're saving for something else, you think you may need to take it out, like we already talked about, a down payment, or maybe it's going back to school, or just emergency savings. Tax-free savings account would be where I would focus that time or that money and investment. Similarly, if depending on what you're investing in, we've already talked about this. If you're speculating on something, or you've got you set aside some percentage of your investment for some real high growth opportunities, tax-free savings account I would recommend for, again, not being hit with the capital gains tax at the back end when you do decide to pull that money out. So again, my main advice would be to just be maximizing both to the best of your ability. Not everybody can do that, obviously, all the time, but try to do that and keep these kind of high level thoughts. It really depends on what situation you're in.
For sure. And what are the most common mistakes that you see Canadians making with their TFSA?
Well, first off, I would say not using it. I mean, there are, I'd say more Canadians should be using a tax-free savings account. It's not that hard to set up. So that'd be number one. Learn to use it if you're not. And then we've already touched on it, simply using it as a basic savings account. You can be much more aggressive in your investing because you're not paying tax on the capital gains. You can have big wins. You can't have the capital losses, so that's one issue on the kind of tax planning side. But I would say that those are the two things: not using it, and then simply using it as the basic savings account, which it can be for some, for emergency funds, that sort of thing. No issue with that, but it's again much more flexible, much more dynamic of a vehicle that Canadians should be utilizing.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then what about RRSPs? What are the most common mistakes that you see Canadians making with those?
So I'd say similar, not using it enough. The take-up rates are higher with RRSPs, I think, because they've been around longer than a TFSA, but Canadians still should be using and investing in them. And then I think, withdrawing earlier than retirement for purposes other than retirement, and hopefully with the introduction of the tax-free savings account, there's less of this. But when you're doing that, you're just, you're paying the taxes again at a higher marginal rate if you're still working. And you're really defeating the purpose of kind of that long-term investment. So pulling the money out too early would be kind of one of the critical mistakes with the RRSP. But hopefully with the introduction of the tax-free savings account, which again, getting back to the public policy purpose, that was the purpose, to allow Canadians to have a vehicle that they can pull out for emergencies or for other kind of their child's wedding or something like that, where they need to, or they want to spend that money. Or those would be the two.
Yeah. So with the top kind of a RRSP mistake, so you're it sounds like you're talking about a scenario where, let's say, somebody doesn't really have money in their TFSA, doesn't have much of a cash cushion or emergency fund, something like that, doesn't have that, and then but has a bunch of money that in their RRSP that they've been putting away, and then something critical happens, like I don't know, they need to get a brand new car, or they have some big emergency where there's a very big financial cost, and now they have really no choice. It's basically either go into debt or start taking money out of the RRSP. But if they're already in a higher tax bracket, then now that withdrawal gets tacked onto their already high income, let's say, and now they're getting a really small portion of their RRSP. So kind of defeating the whole purpose of having an RRSP where you can withdraw it at a lower tax bracket. Is that what you're saying?
You've summarized it well, and obviously I understand that sometimes there's circumstances you can't do anything about, but to as best as you can to avoid that, because you're really, as you mentioned, you're defeating the purpose. You're now paying taxes at that high marginal rate again. You're basically giving back the tax breaks that you received, and it's harmful to your financial position. So.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a good sort of action item for all the listeners, is make sure that you have your sort of cash cushions, emergency funds set up accordingly so that you don't fall into this really horrible scenario where you're basically, where you have this dilemma of, do I withdraw from my RRSP or do I go into debt? And that's because you didn't have enough of a cash cushion through your TFSA or through another savings account. So I think that's a really good kind of critical point to have. So when it comes to financial literacy, what would you say are the biggest misconceptions or things that Canadians just don't know about that are really holding them back and limiting their net worth?
So I think there's actually a lot of misconceptions or money myths holding people back. We actually, so as I mentioned, have joined Enriched Academy. We have a full course on what we call money myths, and it's actually the first course. It's the first thing that we teach, because there are a lot of these things that hold people back. We've got quite a few that we list, but I'd say the two biggest misconceptions, in my opinion, are first, people, you need to have money to start saving or investing. You need to have a certain amount of income. And I think that's a real misconception, because I think these habits need to be formed early, in terms of saving, paying yourself first. And it's actually easier when you're younger, before, a lifestyle creep begins and there's more bills, you've got kids, those sort of things. So forming those habits easier, and learning early about money is important. Not waiting like, I don't have to worry about this. I'll worry until I'll start thinking about this when I get a raise or I get the next job. And that goes for budgeting too. I'll do this when I make more money, or I'll think about this when I make more money. So I'd say that's number one, a big misconception. And then I'd say a second one that's equally important is, there's this view that the skill of making money is more important than the skill of saving or investing money. There's obviously tons of focus on making money and getting skills, years of schooling and that's totally critical. We need that schooling, but there's so little time and effort spent on the skill of actually saving and investing money. Podcasts like yourself and that are an exception, I would say. And I think those skills are equally important. We have live events where we teach these concepts, and we have very well paid professionals coming to our events, real estate agents, doctors, lawyers, etc., who have no issue making money. They make hundreds of thousands of dollars, but many of them are living paycheck to paycheck. They have smaller net worths than people without their degrees who are making much less money, because those people have worked on the skill of making money, have disciplined themselves, aren't spending more than they make. So it's not new concepts, but I think that there just needs to be a shift. There's a real focus again on the skill of making money, and not enough on the skill of saving and investing money.
For sure. Yeah, I've noticed you can always outspend your income, no matter how high your income is, right? Especially you hear in the news sometimes, right, about celebrities and athletes who make millions really early on, enough to retire for like a regular person, and then they go bankrupt, right? Because for different reasons, right? But it's that whole thing where you can't just out earn you can't just keep earning, and then just negligently spending and not learning how to manage your money. And then like you said, you wake up one day and you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, let's say, like you said, some of these professionals, but yet their net worth is actually lower than someone making a lot less than that. I think that's really, really fascinating point. And to your point too about learning this early as opposed to just waiting until you get more money, I think that's really, really critical. And I talk about this in my investing course a lot as well, was, that's a common objection people have is, oh, I don't have enough, I can only save, let's say, a few $100s a month or something like that. So why bother, right? Well, this is when you want to learn the ropes. This is when you want to get started because the stakes are a lot lower. And it's a great way to get your feet wet and get familiar with it. And so that way, when you do eventually get that promotion, or let's say you get an inheritance or whatever, or maybe you have a little side business that takes off, right? All of a sudden you've got money coming in. Are you sure you want, at that point, with all these bigger numbers, this large amount of money, you want to learn it now? I mean, it's going to be a lot more stressful, and the mistakes, if you make any, are going to be a lot more significant because you're playing with much higher dollar amounts. So I hear you. I mean, to start it early, I think, is absolutely critical. And then you learn how it's actually not that difficult once you get the basics down. It's not like you need to know some fancy calculus or anything like that. It's very simple elementary school math is as far as it goes, I would say, for the most part. And yeah, I just don't know. I'm really, really glad you mentioned that point because I think it holds a lot of Canadians back. And it's really, I remember when taking calculus in high school, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm horrible at math. This calculus is hard. I'm gonna be horrible at finance, right? And then later you get into the real world, and you're like, wait a minute, I haven't used calculus ever since graduating, and I'm in this field now, right? So I don't know. So I think that's I hope your conversation here and your advice inspires some people to look into this and realize that it's not that difficult. It's a big thing. I'll just give you one quick analogy that we use in our courses. Because we have a lot of people come to us, they've got debt issues. They say they can't save, and we say, well, okay, what would allow you to save? And they say, well, I'm making $50,000, but if I was making $150,000, it'd be no problem. And we give the analogy of working out at a gym. If you can't curl 50 pounds and you can't be able to manage, $50,000. Jumping up to 150 pounds to curl is impossible. You're not going to be able to do it. So you've got to be able to manage where you are. And then it becomes, as you said, so much easier going forward once you start making more money to just already have the habits built in. For sure. And I remember taking your course, and I love that analogy. I think that's a really, really good way of putting it. Or it's like trying to run a marathon when you haven't even run your first 10K yet, right? I mean, You're like, why are you doing that to yourself? You have to build up the skills, like you said. So no, that's great. And then I find that we Canadians too, sometimes we get worried about the changes that the government might do, which can impact our financial future. So in particular, there definitely seems to be some worry about the large percentage of the Canadian population retiring and about there not being enough young people to support them from a tax revenue perspective. Is that something you think we should be worried about?
Yeah, frankly, I think it's one of the larger public policy issues facing not only Canada, but the entire world. You've seen it play out in Japan already, but it's happening across the world. We're simply not having enough children to replace ourselves. And there's real challenges, I think, just speaking to Canada first, of, potential intergenerational tensions. Younger people are already facing all kinds of, financial pressures. And they're now likely going to have to be paying higher taxes, higher deficits to pay for the services of, to support the retirees. So yeah, I think it's a significant challenge that needs to be addressed.
Now, what changes to our government benefits do you think may take place in the future to be able to accommodate something like that?
So I think there'll probably be a number of changes that'll have to be looked at. I mean, healthcare is one example. Healthcare is already 40% of provincial budgets, and the parliamentary budget officer says every province is, fiscally unsustainable because of the rising healthcare costs. Caregiving is another area, sort of thing. So, but in terms of actual benefits, I think there could be a few. Back when I was in government in 2012, made changes to OAS, Old Age Security, announcing a kind of phased-in approach to raise the age of eligibility from 65 to 67. We thought this was good public policy for the exact reasons we've talked about. Canadians living longer, Canadians working longer. The little-known fact that the age of retirement of 65 was set nearly 100 years ago, when life expectancy was in the late 50s. So age of retirement was set at a higher rate than people were expected to live. So we just thought it made sense to move from 65 to 67. The Liberal government reversed that back in 2014 or 2015 when they came into power for political reasons. Essentially, older people vote more than younger people, but there really was no public policy sense. And I clearly think this is going to have to be changed in the future, and similar programs to this are going to have to be changed in the future. But the problem is that the problem will be more acute and potentially less phase-in time. So I think benefits like that. I do think CPP is currently on a strong footing, but I think that's something that we'll have to be monitoring. And there'll be other, potential benefit programs.
Mm-hmm. And then for anybody that won't be retiring for another 10 years, or maybe someone that's going to retire soon because they're retiring early, but realistically won't be eligible for those benefits for, let's say, another, 5 years or 10 years, it's so far in the future, right? It's hard to plan for. So how can we best prepare ourselves for this uncertainty of how much income from the government we'll actually end up receiving in the future?
Personally, I'm planning as if any of that government income will be a bonus. I'm planning in my retirement to kind of, with my investments, my retirement planning I'm hoping will be sustaining. I still think, as I mentioned, that CPP and others will be there. But I'm doing my best to max out my RRSPs and other savings vehicles, because I just unsure. Again, I don't think this is alarmist. I think this is just good planning. Again, there will be some level of government support there. It's just unclear, I would say, how much. So that's what I would recommend to anyone, is just to be planning as that income would be a bonus.
Mm-hmm. Another reason why it's important to learn this early on, right? And so you can
absolutely. Yeah, get compound interest working for you. So
exactly. As opposed to just kind of hoping the government will take care of things, right? And that's a very risky maneuver. It's interesting. I remember I spoke to one financial planner, and they said that when they were doing financial plans for their clients, especially for their younger clients, like let's say somebody in their 30s, that they in their financial models, when they're doing their retirement projections and figuring out how much you need to retire, they actually didn't even include OAS, just to be conservative, right? And so they would look at things like, okay, looking at your savings, okay, you're going to get CPP, but let's just assume OAS doesn't exist anymore, and let's see if you can still retire with that not existing in the future. Do you think that's too extreme of a way to take it, or do you think that's actually, for a conservative scenario, that's actually not a bad idea?
I think for conservative scenario, that's not a bad idea. That's kind of what I referenced in terms of using government income as a bonus. I still think there'll be some of it there. Again, there's no talk, and it'd be a very difficult thing for a government to change some of that. But I think we could well get in a situation where finances are what they are, that some significant changes will have to be made. And so my own personal planning, I'm planning as if it won't be there. And then if it's there, that's a bonus.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I can see them, like you said, putting the age back, or maybe they increase the clawbacks or something like that, just to squeeze.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it sounds like it would be almost like a political suicide maneuver to just totally just get rid of it, right? People would be up in arms about it because so many are relying on it. But I could see them making little tweaks to it where now you get less, or now there's more clawbacks, or you get it later, that kind of a thing. Very, very strong case for not depending on it, like what you're saying. That's great. Now, I'd love to get your perspective on the Registered Disability Savings Plan, so the RDSP. It's something that's relatively new. It's created by Minister Flaherty when you worked with him, and it helps families with disabled children, but I find it isn't really well known to Canadians. Can you give a brief explanation of the RDSP? Tell us why it was created and what people should know about it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'd be happy to. So that's another one of the registered kind of savings vehicles that was created within the last 10 years by Minister Flaherty. And the background behind it is really, to support families with children with disabilities. There's a real, financial burden, financial stress, in addition, obviously, to the emotional stress for parents thinking about, their children with disabilities growing older, having to, support them if they can't live on their own. So the cost of that is, a real concern to people. And there really wasn't a savings program or very little support for families in those situations. The minister, Jim Flaherty, knew this personally. He had a son with disabilities, so it was an issue that was, pretty close to home for him. And so he had lots of people from that community kind of talking to him about this. A panel was created right when he first started, kind of to look at the issue. And that's where the idea of the RRSP was created. It's based on the RRSP, and there's some technical details. I don't have time to get into the whole thing, but essentially, the government will match contributions up to $3 for every dollar that, depending on your income level, that you contribute to the program. There's a lot of flexibility built into the program for children to the beneficiaries to use money for whatever kind of means they need. The benefits are not clawed back. And the other, one of the other great features about it is anyone can contribute to RRSP. So it could be friends, it could be families, that sort of thing that can support, those children with disabilities. I've spoken about this. I'd say one of the biggest issues is just awareness around this program. People just aren't aware it's a new program, and there's certain people that it's obviously catered towards that need it, and many others don't. But we've spoken about it. I've spoken about it at our events, and people have come up to me, fairly emotional because they'd never heard of it before, and they had been saving, or they've been doing fundraisers for nieces or nephews who had disabilities, and if they had this program, they could have multiplied significantly the savings for these children. So that's the genesis behind it. That's why it's out there. If people want to know more, rrsp.com or .ca is a website that has all sorts of information about the program and can help families set it up, because there's a bit of paperwork to set up these programs for families. But I'm very proud of kind of our government and Minister Flaherty for creating this program. I think it serves a real need for people, and just want to do as much as I can to promote the program because it's so critical. And one of the biggest issues again is lack of awareness about it.
No, that's wonderful. It's great that they're doing that. And I mean, for anybody listening, it's even if you don't have a disabled child, I mean, there's definitely a chance that you at least know someone who does, whether it's a coworker, friend, family member. That definitely let them know about that. You can send them this episode or go to the the link that Kevin just mentioned as well. That definitely, I mean, it can make such a huge difference. Kevin, do you guys cover that on Enriched Academy at all?
We do, yeah. So
okay,
we've
awesome.
got a section. Yeah, so that's covered in our courses as well, and we also get into RESPs. So we cover tax-free savings account, RRSPs, RDSPs, and RESPs, just so people are aware of the kind of the four big kind of buckets of registered accounts that they should know about.
Okay, wonderful. That's great. No, perfect. Thank you for sharing that with us. And you recently joined, speaking of Enriched Academy, you recently joined them to help with your mission of increasing financial literacy for Canadians. Can you tell us about Enriched Academy some more and why you decided to join them?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I've known the co-founder of Enriched Academy for 20 some odd years. Friend of my wife's kind of growing up. And he's had a real passion for this area, as have I. He came into it, there was no plan to build a company. His background is when he, finished high school, he got a job in retail and different areas and quickly found himself $20,000 in credit card debt. Didn't understand what 19-point 9% interest meant, thought that might be a good thing. And was really upset at that point to realize, the challenge he was in and the fact he'd never been taught about this. And so when he got into a new job, he had a sales training job. He started giving back by going into high schools, in part to, learn to be able to be a better public speaker, because that was what his job was, but also just to give back and teach people about money. And the first number of these events went horribly wrong. Like, kids were falling asleep, that sort of thing. But he kept at it. He's a pretty diligent guy. And eventually, his presentations got so good, parents would start calling him up. And he had a couple instances where parents called him up and said, "You're the one speaking at my daughter's school. She's asked me to take back all her Christmas presents and wants me to get her stocks instead. Like, how did you do that in an hour presentation?" And had enough of those calls that he realized, hey, there could be a business here. So he and his partner at the time, business partner Jay Seabrook, filmed some of these talks, made them into a DVD set, and started selling them. And did very well. They went on Dragon's Den, had support from some of the Dragons, and has now the company's now shifted to an online model. Obviously, people aren't using DVDs anymore. And the focus is, while there's still a focus on, young adults and teens, really discovered that, the reason teens and adults don't know how to save or invest is because their parents don't. There's a much larger market, and kind of focus to kind of institutions and, schools and places, unions, places where people are being trained and not having been taught this. So Kevin, who's a co-founder, had been approaching me about joining. I made the leap last summer, in part because when I was in Minister Flaherty's office, one of the files I had was the financial literacy file. It's something that Jim believed in strongly. We created a financial literacy task force that led to the financial literacy leader. There's a lot of work on financial literacy, but a lot of it I found was just kind of pushing information at people. And what I really found was the Enriched model, and what had been developed by Enriched Academy was the best, product, system, program out there to really teach people about financial literacy. And the model is I'd say, based on 5 things. So first of all, it's engaging and authentic. I mentioned Kevin kind of honing his material over time, giving thousands of presentations to really ensure that it's engaging and audience connect with it. It's funny and entertaining. It's also authentic, because, Kevin tells the story of, being $20,000 in debt, credit card debt, not understanding. And so people can relate to it. And we kind of demonstrate that it's not rocket science. Some of the stuff is pretty basic, but you just have to know it. So that's the first part of the model. The second is we've really shifted towards mandatory. We work with partners where our training is required, not optional. Because I found, and we've all found in kind of being in this space, financial literacy is one of the easiest things to procrastinate on. We've already talked about don't have enough money, too young, retirement's, a long ways off. So if it isn't mandatory, if it isn't worked into required training, the majority of people will put it off. And I'd say the last 2 kind of parts of our model that I think set us apart is this is, 100% what we do. It's our only focus is on financial education. We don't sell products. This isn't something we're doing at the side of our desk. This is entirely what we're focused on. And I think a lot of the other models are out there, the banks and that, you mentioned them. I worked at one. They do believe in financial literacy, but there's always, they're a bank. They're always trying to sell products. They're trying to sell a credit card or something else that's always in the background. And so it's not their entire focus. And that's our focus. And the last one is, value add, and we have a complete program. A lot of people write great books, and I got my start, I'd say, in grade 9. My grandpa gave me a copy of The Wealthy Barber, and I read that, and compound interest kind of just blew my mind. But not everyone's going to read a book, right? And so we've got a complete program that, 13 and counting courses sort of thing. And so that's, I think, again, something that sets us apart. And so for all those reasons, first, engaging, authentic; second, the mandatory model, all our focus, and kind of the value add complete program. I just think the Enriched model is the best one out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely great. I saw a lot of the videos as well. And anytime somebody can make this field kind of entertaining and funny and exciting to others, I think that requires some recognition, right? Because by default, I think people think, oh, personal finance, it's kind of dry. Who wants to hear about budgeting? That sounds boring. Sounds like homework, right? So the way that you guys have done it, I think, is really, really impressive. Where, I mean, it's actually enjoyable to watch. And I mean, I'm a bit biased, I guess, because I'm a kind of a financial geek, so I'm probably gonna like it anyway. But I mean, the fact that I'm watching these and laughing and smiling it says something. Where I think somebody that maybe isn't as passionate about this as you and I are, they can still enjoy it, enjoy the journey in increasing their financial literacy, as opposed to it being this chore that they really don't want to do and are there, kicking and screaming, trying not to do it, but feel like they have to because now they're, in credit card debt, or they have very little saved for retirement. And if they keep on this track, it's going to be panic mode eventually. So, so that's what's wonderful. And then you mentioned Dragons then as well. It was great seeing Enriched Academy be so successful when it appeared on Dragons Den. Can you tell us what it's been like having the Dragons as advocates for Enriched Academy? And also, and at the same time, if there's anything else you want to say about Enriched Academy in terms of how you guys promote financial literacy in Canada, feel free to do so as well.
Sure. Yeah. So having the Dragons on was as supporters and having a deal with them was fantastic. So the guys, Kevin and Jay, went on the show, I guess, about 5 years ago now. They actually had all 5 Dragons bidding, wanting to make deals. Kevin O'Leary was one of the ones on the team or on the show at the time. He was pushing to just do something on his own. Didn't want any of the other Dragons. The guys decided that his brand of kind of wealth building, and that wasn't something they were looking to have for young Canadians sort of thing. So they ended up doing a deal with Bruce Croxon and Jim Treliving. So Bruce Croxon created Lava Life and is now kind of working in a venture capital space, and Jim Treliving, best known for Boston Pizza. And both those deals have been fantastic. Some of the most successful deals both Jim and Bruce say that they've had. They've been great supporters. I mean, they just gave a real round of endorsement for our company, for Enriched Academy, to have them on board, and also great kind of mentors and kind of being able to bounce ideas off of. So very supportive there. In terms of what we're kind of doing now and how we work to improve financial literacy, so there's a couple of different facets. So kind of the content was built on doing live events, and that will never change. So we do live events across the country. I just got back from Victoria, where we did an event there for about 150 people. So that's one facet. So we have these events across the country, and people are able to come out to those. They pay roughly $400 for a full day, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., where we cover all the topics, and it's entertaining. As I mentioned earlier, like, people are laughing, they're engaged, they're inspired. So that's one aspect. The aspect that I work on is kind of our online program, and so we've got this online program where we've filmed and we've interviewed experts. It's been updated a number of times now, and really focused on trying to get that training into schools. We work with a lot of career colleges, some universities, working with actually a number of police associations. So police have found this is something that they're not training their members about right now, and financial stress adds to a lot of mental health issues, and so they've found it very helpful for their members to kind of have this training. So it just relieves one area of stress, and obviously a very, very stressful job. We've got to deal with the CFL, and so working with all this, the professional football players in the CFL to teach them the basics of money, and I'm hoping that we can work more with kind of high school students and elementary students. So we just launched a program in the Niagara region here in Ontario, EL Crossley Secondary School. So that's a high school just outside of Niagara on the Lake. And 50 students there are going through our program right now. They'll end it by the end of March. And I'm really hopeful this is something that the Ontario government and other governments will see the value in and kind of roll it out to schools across the country, because I think it's a critical life skill It's something you mentioned, calculus and that. I took calculus as well. I took every, type of math there is, but I'm definitely not using it every day. Whereas I'm looking at my bank balance and all of those things every day. So, lots of ways that we're, kind of focused on, promoting and improving financial literacy. We also have a whole coaching division. So people that, take our course or come to one of our live events and say, look, this has been great. I learned a lot, but I really would like some accountability and somebody to walk me through this. So we've got a whole series of coaches. And again, we're different in that we're not financial advisors. We're not selling product. We don't make money on commission like that. But we're there to really explain the language. We compare ourselves to, Rosetta Stone. Money is a language. And once you understand the language, it isn't that complicated, but you just need to be able to interpret it and understand it. You can get through, you can handle most of anything with it. So, those are the areas where, really hoping to help Canadians. We really believe, that all Canadians deserve financial freedom. That's our mission. And, I think it's something that's pretty critical. And there really isn't anyone that I talk to that doesn't agree that this topic is needed, and more people need to learn about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really wonderful. And yeah, I mean, because people can go to a bank and get a, quote unquote free advisor and try to get their financial literacy that way. But like you said, you guys don't sell any investment products, whereas they do. And so every time they open their mouths, you're wondering, okay, are they telling me this because this is for my own best interest? Or are they telling me this because they have a quota they want you to hit with some mutual fund or GIC or whatever the case may be, right? And so there's always that barrier, I think, where you don't really know if the advice you're getting is the right advice for you. And I remember hearing someone say, which I thought was really wise, how sometimes the most expensive advice is the free advice, right? Because they're not working for free, right? So they're making money somehow. Something is paying for the building, something is paying to keep the lights on, something's paying for the salaries. So nothing is really free. And so don't fall into that deception that you are getting some free advice, free financial literacy by just going and talking to a person you think has it. So no, that's great. I mean, I'm really glad you guys, you guys don't have that kind of conflict of interest potentially there. So that's great. So where can we hear more from you, Kevin? Where can we learn more from you?
So our company is enrichedacademy.com. You can find out information there. People want to reach out to me directly. My email is kevin.mccarthy@enrichedacademy.com. I think you'll probably put that in the show notes. I'm not really on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, but that's about it in terms of my social media. I find it a little too distracting otherwise. But yeah, so our website, email me directly or find me on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best way to reach out. Would love to talk to any of your listeners and kind of talk about if there's ways we could help them out.
Wonderful. No, it's great. I mean, I love what you guys are producing. I've seen so much of it already, and what you guys stand for, and the lack of conflicts. It's a really good. I'm glad you guys are a positive force in this industry, because there's a lot of negative forces. So I feel like you guys and myself, we're trying to fight the good fight here and help Canadians out, without just trying to get them into some expensive funds and things of that nature. So so thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate your advice and your wisdom, and then sharing your experience with us. And I'm sure a lot of listeners got a lot out of this as well. So thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Cornell. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Bye. All right. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Definitely check out Kevin and his team's financial literacy training over at buildwealthcanada.ca/academy to make sure you're not missing out on some key pieces of knowledge that might be holding you and your family back financially. And if you're already on the advanced side, then definitely feel free to instead share that link with any friends, family, or coworkers that you think would benefit from this financial literacy checkup to help make sure that they're not making any critical mistakes with their money. So that link again is buildwealthcanada.ca/academy. And of course, if you haven't already, as a Build Wealth Canada listener, don't forget to get that free 1-year subscription to Canadian MoneySaver Magazine and double that interest rate that you're currently getting in your checking and savings accounts by signing up for free to my favorite bank that I've been using for years over at buildwealthcanada.ca/EQ. Once you do that, forward me any email that EQ sends you over to bonus@buildwealthcanada.ca/EQ. and I'll send you the coupon code that gets you a 1-year free subscription to Canadian MoneySaver Magazine. And make sure you do have to use that specific link, buildwealthcanada.ca/EQ, right before you sign up. And that basically is going to qualify you to get the free 1-year magazine subscription. All right. And you'll also get that extra perk of unlimited free Interac e-transfers every single month through EQ, and you'll also know that you're getting one of, if not the highest interest rates in Canada on your savings account. And I will say too that this isn't one of those promotions where you get, a high interest rate for 6 months or for a month or whatever, and then it goes back to being some ridiculously low rate. So they basically, from my experience, have had one of, if not the highest interest rates consistently, and it's not some sort of promotional thing. It's just always that high. So it's definitely awesome. I definitely highly recommend you check it out. And that's it. So that link again is buildwealthcanada.ca/EQ. Go there, sign up, send me an email to bonus@buildwealthcanada.ca with any other confirmation emails they send you, and you'll get that free 1-year subscription to Canadian MoneySaver Magazine. It's basically a $20 a year subscription that you're now getting for free for a year. All right, so enjoy. Have a great week. Thanks for supporting the show in that way, and talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Build Wealth Canada podcast at www.buildwealthcanada.ca.